everyone, and welcome to a new video on the channel. Today we are going to do something a little bit different when it comes to the reading update. I read a total of 22 books over November, and normally I sit down and chat with you all about the books I read and show the physical copies I have. And I've done the first half. I will link that in the description below from the first half of November. But the second half of November, I managed to read 12 books, and only one of them I had a physical copy of, and it wasn't like just that book, it was a omnibus book. So I have decided to do a voiceover so I can just edit this on my computer rather than get the equipment out and do that. If you're new to my channel, I don't show myself on camera. I don't feel comfortable yet doing that. So this is the best option I have. And I totally respect if watching a picture and listening to me talk is not your jam. Totally respect that. So if you want to skip this video, that's for you. I'm more than happy for you to come back for another video where you can actually see me doing something. But for those who want to hear my thoughts about the books that I read over the second half of November, let's get straight into it because, like I said, I've read 12 and that's a lot to talk about. I'm going to try and be as brief as possible, but also get my points across if I can, which sounds kind of contradictory. We'll see how we go. So the first book that I completed was part of a novella trilogy. The novella trilogy is called Museum of, what is it? A Museum of Literature Romance, and I read books 1 through to 3 in a day and a bit. I was doing a readathon, if you weren't aware, over November, and around this point in the month, they dropped a crazy, I think it was 48-hour, like, chaos section. So we had to read as many books as we could during that time. And I joined in by doing a whole bunch of little books that I could. So I read Royal Valentine, The Attraction Distraction, and It Happened One Christmas Eve, and that's part of the trilogy. It's all written by Jen McKinley. I've never read anything by this author before. I just thought that it would be the easiest way to get through some romances. And overall, it was an okay time. I gave Royal Valentine 3 stars. I gave Attraction Distraction 2.5 stars. And then I gave the Happened One Christmas Eve 3.5 stars. I really did like that one, and it was the right time of year to be listening to it as well. I did listen to all of them on audiobook as well, so it was pretty quick how fast I got through them actually. And yeah, Royal Valentine is a very subtle nod to Pride and Prejudice. It follows I think she was a curator or some sort at the museum that this is set in, and she doesn't really enjoy parties and stuff, so she goes back to her office to find a man in there, and he gives his name over as, I think it was Albert that he gave his name over as, and for a month they have a romance, and he gets to see New York through her eyes and all that. It was really nice, and then he disappears. And she's heartbroken because she started falling in love with him, and then she has to travel to England because one of the exhibitions, I guess, or like what are they? The people that fund things and offer things to the museum. I can't think of the name off the top of my head. Oh, it's driving me insane. But anyway, she had to go collect a collection from the owner, and it turns out that Albert wasn't really his name. It's Jamie. This was all pretty much explained in the synopsis for the book, and it was pretty predictable. It was an alright time. I thought it was okay. I did think that the female main protagonist did drag out her betrayal and hurt from Jamie not giving full truths a little bit long, but it was an alright read, and that's why I gave it 3 stars. The Attraction Distraction follows one of her colleagues who likes to set out on adventures to collect things for museums before others, and she's invited to join a whole bunch of other people who do the same thing at an island in Greece, and they have to find some artifact. There's hints that it's there and everything. And it also turns into a murder mystery, or like keep yourself alive type of thing, because people were getting injured and getting thrown out of the competition type thing. I didn't enjoy this one as much. I thought it was a bit weird. Obviously, the main characters knew each other. They'd had a previous fling and been in love and then betrayed each other. There's a theme going here, right? You can see where it's going. Didn't enjoy that one as much. That's why I gave it 2.5 stars. And then the last one, It Happened One Christmas Eve, is the boss of the museum, and she's older, which I appreciated, and she doesn't want to get married to anyone. She's happy with her career, but her mum, who is rich and old money, has been putting money into the museum to sort of keep her there. And so she now has to follow through on what her mother wants, which is grandchildren and a marriage. And she's not prepared to marry this guy, but he's about to propose to her, and she flees on a sleigh with a horse. And the dude that's driving it's obviously dressed as Santa, but he's not really Santa. The dude that owns the thing, he was a reporter coming to get the scoop. And they flee, and then they spend the next few days trying to get to her house in Maine, I think it was, and to get away from the city and stuff, and while it all blows over. And I found this one really cute, although it was really predictable and cliche. I just enjoyed it. I like Christmas novellas. It has everything that it needed. It wasn't too unbelievable, and whilst there were hijinks that just were ridiculous, it was still a lot of fun. I enjoyed this one the most. Yeah, that I gave that one 3.5 oh, I can't speak. Gave it 3.5 stars. I think this one was the best one of them all, and I would be inclined to pick up more by this author, but I'm not going to rush anytime soon to do so. So the next book I finished was To Kill a Shadow by Catherine Quinn. This is book one in the 𝓤𝓱𝓮𝓻 series, and I have read two other books by this author. I was really excited because she's been finally traditionally published. This was her first series picked up that way, and I really enjoyed the first book and the other series that I read by this author. I really liked the way she wrote it, but the second book was very much a miss for me. It was too dark, and it just seemed to lose the plot for me. So I was hopeful that this one would be a I wouldn't say redemption, but I guess that is the right word to use. I was looking for the same sort of feel that I had with book one. And since this was the first book in the series, I was hopeful that would be the case. Unfortunately for me, I think I was a little bit too optimistic and didn't really pay enough attention to the synopsis to notice that it would be another dark fantasy. And so, unfortunately, this wasn't for me. I wasn't the right reader for it. That being said, there are quite a few issues with this book that led me to give it 3 stars. I definitely think that Catherine Quinn has potential and can write. I just feel like there was a little bit of a disconnection between what elements really needed to be highlighted more. The world building was very, very lacking. She had this amazing lore, and at the top of each chapter, you would get a little snippet of it, but it was not enough to sustain without proper world building behind it. So this is set in a world where there is no light, because there was something with the gods that happened that took it away, and they are obviously struggling to keep um, crops alive since there's no light, and how will they feed their people? So there's this empire called the Eternal Star, and each year boys are taken from every village to support the knights and their goals to enter the Mistlands to discover hopefully the way to get light back. And in this year, it was mandatory for every boy of a certain age, and that meant the main female protagonist's brother, who was unwell. He had I think he had a lung issue, and he couldn't breathe very well. And so she, who conveniently is well trained in fighting and has combat training from her uncle, conveniently steps into the role and goes as the first girl to the, I want to say, academy, where she is trained amongst other boys for the knights. And of course, because she's not like the other girls, and she is very talented at what she does, and she's got all the attitude and like she's very brazen. She reminds me of 𝓤𝓮 from the Throne of Glass series because she just thinks she's that good. And I guess she's got some belief in herself because she has had to learn how to fight from an early age. She's also got a curse. You don't know about it. You just know that she wears gloves over her hands and that everyone's scared of her. So, because she's not like the other girls, of course she falls for her commander, who is not like the other boys and had a bad time just as much as she has. And he is seen as cruel, and he's the king's assassin, and he's bad, and all this. Of course, there's a romance there. I found that the romance aspect of the book took too much away from the world building as well. So the time that we spend with both Kiara and Jude lusting over each other could have been better supported to build the world up to make it more like I feel like you understand enough, but also there's nothing to build on until you get way into the book and all the answers come at the very end, which I don't appreciate because I want to be like my answers to come while I'm asking them, if that makes sense, or to have some reason to wait for them. And so um, Kiara makes some friends. She has her little found family aspect happening, and then she goes into the Mistlands. And this is where it turns incredibly gruesome and dark for really no reason, like aside to show that it's dangerous. I feel like the first death made sense, but then from there out, it just felt like the author was killing people off just because they can. I just, yeah, it wasn't for me. I'll leave it at that. I do think that this is a book that perhaps people who don't really care about plotline as much as character romance would enjoy. There's a lot of people that are liking on this book. It just wasn't for me. I don't think it was built enough. In fact, I would have preferred there no romance because the storyline, if it had been given enough time to thrive, would have been fantastic on its own. The next book I completed was The Roughest Draft by Emily Wibberley and Austin Sigmund Broker. This is a romance between two authors, Katrina and Nathan. They used to write together. They created a couple of books, I think, and after their last book that went really big, something happened to pull them apart, and they haven't spoken in 3 years. And unfortunately, they still have a contract for one more book. And due to Nathan trying to write by himself and not being as popular on his own, his publisher wants to push, sorry, his agent wants to push for him to work on this contracted book with Katrina. And Kat doesn't really want to write at all anymore and is sort of, well, she definitely is manipulated by her fiance, who is also her agent, um, to write the one book because they need money, so he says. So they end up going back to working together, and you get to see dual point of view, and you also get the present as well as the past when they wrote the last book together, and you get to see sort of along the way how that relationship has progressed in many ways and how it fizzled out in others. And I thought it was really interesting. So Nathan was married at the time of the last book, and Katrina was not. She was single. And obviously, this is a romance, so they do fall for each other. And along the way, things happen, and Nathan and Katrina both realize that they like each other. But to do that, obviously, Nathan has to get a divorce. So now in the present time, he is divorced, but she is now engaged to her agent slash fiance. So yeah, it's a different situation again. And then obviously they have to re-go through everything, learning how to write together again, learning to understand each other again. And obviously there's this level of natural connection between them already, but you get to see how that is strained under what happened. And I do have to say that I feel like what happened was a bit dramatic, and also anticlimactic at the same time, in a sense that it felt like by the time you got to finding out what actually happened, you don't really care as much, but at the same time, the reaction of one of the characters, I feel, was a bit like almost as if she was the character in a book herself rather than, the author of it. And so, yeah, I really did like the way that they approached the feelings in this. I do feel like it was very dragged out at points and very slow at other points to get to the point. And in other areas, I did really enjoy it. So I gave this one 3.5 stars. So, because of the readathon that I was participating in, one of the prompts we got was we had to start a series, which would have been fine. But we did end up with a punishment because we came last, I think, and the punishment was that it had to be of a genre that I don't normally read. So I pretty much just read fantasy and romance, subgenre of paranormal, and also sometimes I read sci-fi, but it's not like huge on my list. All the sci-fi books that I did have at that point, um, were ones I'd already started. However, I did find one. I didn't end up using it for that prompt because I finished this one first. I'm just putting that out there. But for this prompt, I ended up going with an erotica because my friend has like I've read one of the books by this author before, and she said this one was even better. So I figured, well, I gave 3 stars to Neon Gods by Katie Robert. Surely I'll give this one more then if my friend says that this one is better. In the end, I gave The Dragon's Bride 2.5 stars, and whilst it was very easy to get through, it's only 190 pages long, and I listened to it as an audiobook. I'm glad that it wasn't any longer than that. I did like Soul, who is the dragon, before the smut really started to kick in, and then I just felt uncomfortable. This is just not a genre for me. I very much so figured out by reading this or listening to it that it's just not a genre for me. And I'm not going to give really any other information about that because I know a lot of people do enjoy this, and all the power to you. I just know that this is not a genre that I'm going to enjoy, so there's no point me criticizing the book or putting it out there when it's not something I'm going to enjoy anyway. So 2.5 stars, and we'll leave it at that. The next book that I finished was the sci-fi that I started, and it is Whisper by Lynette Noni. I used this book to complete my author A to Z challenge with the last name being an N. It was the only letter I needed, so I finished it with this book. This is set in Australia, and it is sci-fi dystopian-ish. Essentially, it follows a girl who we know as Jane, because she won't give over her real name, and she is in a institute. She is essentially being tortured. Um, she had something happen to her that you don't really understand at first, and she self-admitted, like she willingly admitted herself to a psychiatric hospital, and there she was plucked up from there and taken to this institute. And while she's there, she undergoes a lot of like different types of training. She is barely fed, barely clothed, and essentially this process is to try and break her to so she would speak. And she hasn't spoken in 2 years, so they just continue the same sort of stuff with her every single day. And then they decide to change tactics up and give her a friend, and it works. She starts to feel comfortable around this person because he's actually treating her like a human being. And in the end, he gets to take her out, and um, she has a moment where there's almost an accident about to happen, and she finally speaks for the first time, and it then opens up this whole world about how there are people that have magical powers, and they can speak things into action. And so for her, she was able to say the word stop, and the whole world stopped around her. So from there on, you get to know a little bit about her. what happened to make her scared, but she doesn't really understand anything around her, and so she has to relearn it all whilst she's in this institute, and she gets to see this underground like group of people almost being trained to be like government weapons. And she's dubious, but at the same time, these people also have the same ability as her, so she's feeling a bit like she belongs somewhere. Yeah, that I think I'll leave it there. It was really interesting. At points, I was uncomfortable. Again, I don't really like torture things, so dark fantasy or like dystopia is not hugely my thing. But yeah, I enjoyed it enough. I gave it 3.5 stars, and I will finish the book. It was only 225 pages long, so I've got another 200-ish pages to read for the second book, which I hope to do in December, but I'm not sure if I will. But yeah, want to finish the duology. It's not Lynette Noni's best work. I still feel like The Prison Healer is fantastic compared, but we all start somewhere, and this book came before that. So yeah, I enjoyed it enough. You'll notice that a lot of the things that I read over November were for the readathon prompts, and this was another one. We got the kitchen prompt, so we had to read something that was about food or in a kitchen. And I read A Fellowship of Bakers and Magic by J. Penner. This is book one in the 𝓬𝓲𝓕𝓲𝓷, I hope I'm saying that right, series. This is a cozy fantasy with like orcs and fae and humans, and um, essentially, it's about a girl who is known as 𝓤𝓲𝓭, and she knows how to bake, but unfortunately, she's human. And in a world where there's magical people all around you, you are kind of seen less than. At least in her village, she is, and so she always finds it hard to sell her wares at the markets, and her food, sometimes goes to waste because she doesn't get the best spot. But she can bake really well, and she comes across this Faye, and he says that she's been entered in the Bake Off competition that's happening in another city, I think it is. And it turns out that her orc neighbors, who are kind of like her dads, um, they've entered her in it. And so she goes on this journey to enter the baking contest, which is against a whole bunch of magical people. And you can guess where this is kind of going. She's, doing well against all these magical beings, but because she's human, she's frowned upon. And then obviously the fae that takes her along, there's a storyline of romance there. I think this was cute. I think this did um, everything that the synopsis said it would, so that's why I gave it 4 stars. I do think it needed a good polish as a story overall, and I also felt like it was a little bit, I don't want to say the word juvenile because it's not, these are about adults, but it just felt like the level of character development and storyline progression was, I don't know what the right word is to use because it all sounds negative. And I'm not trying to be negative. I just feel like there could have been a bit more depth to everything. Um, yeah, that's basically it. It was really cute. I read it all in one sitting. I smiled a couple of times, and I liked her orc fathers. They were really cute. So, yeah, overall, if you want to read something about cozy friendship, about baking, there's recipes in the back of the book as well. Do give this a go. It's on Kindle Unlimited, and I think it's also quite affordable to just purchase as an ebook as well. We're almost there, guys. We've only got 4 more books to talk about, and the next one we're going to talk about is Would You Rather by Alison Ashley. This is a romance between a friends to lovers romance, and essentially I picked this one up because the main female character has a chronic illness to do with her kidney, and she's awaiting a kidney transplant. And I don't really like to share a lot of information about myself online, but my mother has a kidney condition as well, and I'm her full-time carer. So I found it really interesting to read this because I got to see a character who's caring for someone who's got some sort of kidney failure happening. And it was nice to see that representation because quite often I feel quite alone in the situation. Even though I have really wonderful friends and stuff that are supportive around me, it's really hard watching someone that you love suffer. And so it was really nice to read a book about it. I don't feel like this was the greatest book I've read in a long time. It was very much a marriage of convenience so she could get um, the ability to have medical insurance while she went back to school because her dream job was to be a pediatrics dietitian kind of thing. And so she goes back to school, and obviously, there's the obstacle that they are not really in a relationship, but they both love each other. And someone overheard them coming up with a plan and is blackmailing the main male character. And so there's a couple of other sideline stories, sorry, subplot stories about grief because the main male character has lost a brother. And yeah, it was really well done. I gave it 4 stars because it was quite nice to read a book that I could relate to in some ways. And also, I do think the characters were believable with their love. And when the passion hit, it was really believable and the connection was already there. So I really appreciated that. I do feel it fell a little bit flat in the end, but other than that, it's a good enough read. Yeah, a good enough romance to read. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this video, if you love books that I love, like Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, which I continuously go on about, you can see it in the background of the photo actually, um, and you like those cozy fantasies or fae fantasy, you know, with darker characters like in Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson, that type of fae, then please do yourself a favour and put The Witchwood Knot by Olivia Atwater on your TBR because I absolutely loved this. This is a historical fantasy and it has fae who are really dark and twisted, and it also has magic and fairy tales along the way. There's lots of little stories that are told and a very fantastic female protagonist. So this follows Winnie. She is a orphan who grew up in the workhouses, but she's also got some sort of magical ability that you don't learn about straight away, and she is not afraid of the Fae. She has no fear of them, and she is well, she does have some fear, but you know, she can relate to them. She understands a lot about their customs and stuff from experience, and she goes to the Witchwood Manor because the now I don't know how to say this. Is it the Dowager? The Dowager? Oh, I'm saying it really wrong. Essentially, the grandmother of the house, the Lord's mother. She has asked her to come to the manor to be a governess. She's not trained as one, but to be one, to protect her grandson who's going to have to come and stay in the manor for the summer. And she's not really good with kids, which I really loved. And in the process of looking after Robert, she loses him to the Witchwood Knot, which is where the fairies are, or the fae are. And with the help of a surly butler, who's not really the butler, Mr. Quincy, Winnie travels into the Witchwood Knot to try and uncover the murder mystery around a murder that happens, as well as why there is this whole Witchwood Knot to begin with, what happened to make the trees that were used to build the manor be showing up as faces in the walls and stuff like that. It's really creepy, but also like delightful. So, I really loved this. From the first page, I kid you not, I read the first scene and I was in my bed when I was reading it and I was kicking the sheets because I was so excited. I don't know what it is about dry banter, especially set in a historical fantasy, but I am there for it. And so from the first page, I was smitten. I will say it is a little bit dry at points, a little bit dull. Sometimes there's not really much happening, but overall, the storyline and everything that happens with Winnie, Mr. Quincy, the relationships that Winnie creates with like the servants and with Robert, the charge of her, of the young charge in her house, I just think it's all delightful, and I will definitely be picking up book two. I did get this as an ARC, so it is out. Oh gosh, I don't actually know when it comes out. Let me just check. Is it out now? Um, it came out on November the 28th, so yes, it's out now. Um, do pick this up. It's honestly a delight, and I cannot wait to read more by this author. I've heard that if you like Emily Wilde, you'll love her work. So I'll be picking up more books by her, and you'll get to see my experience with them as well. But next year, the second book in the series is coming out, and I cannot wait. Did I tell you what the series is called? It's called Victorian Fairy Tales. So this was book one of that. Okay, 5 stars. Pick it up, please. So the next book I finished was Right Girl, Wrong Side by Jenny Bard. This is a romance set around a holiday. Essentially, two families who hate each other won um, the week at this holiday house. There was a mix up, and obviously, they both arrive at the same time, and they end up dividing the house in half. There is history between the two main protagonists, um, both. Oh, I can't even remember her name. Avita and is it Ryan? Let me quickly check. Yeah, Ryan. Um, used to go to school together, and the appearance interfered a lot then as well. It's basically the two mothers. They have a really hard time allowing their families around each other because they have history from their own schooling experience. Um, I gave this 2.5 stars. I don't recommend it. Essentially, the adults act more like children than the children do. So the main protagonists are trying to fight to keep the peace between the two families, and then the two parents or the mothers and their partners are just childish. The behavior that happens is just ridiculous. I almost I almost DNF'd it about 3 times. I wish I kind of had, but I already had persevered to the point when I was really like, I want to stop. But I kind of just went, you've got it on 2.5 speed, just get through it. And so, yeah, I gave it 2.5 stars. There were a couple of moments where I really liked it, and I was thinking, oh, this is going to build on something. And I really did like the parts where, especially with Ryan, his younger sister is struggling to get what she wants to do in life across to her parents, who are very rigid, very old school, expect that they can control her because she's good at doing, I think, she plays some sort of like maybe the cello or something, and she's wanting a break from it. And I did like the fact that because there was such an age gap between them, he had like an awkward relationship with his sister, and then that was built upon. So that's why I gave it the extra half a star. But overall, I don't recommend this story. It ends well, but yeah, I can't believe adults would ever act like this. And if they do, I'd be really embarrassed to be related to them. Just putting it out there. And the final book I finished for the month of November was The Scorpio Races by Maggie Stiefvater. I hope I'm saying that right. I don't think this is part of a series. I couldn't find anything online. I picked up this book because for another prompt in the readathon, we had to do a sport. And my friend had recently recommended this because it has horses in it, and I love horses. So I have two of my own. So I picked it up because of that. And this is a really interesting, but also like weird book. I probably would recommend you read this as either a physical or an e-book rather than listening to it. I found that I really struggled listening to this, not because of what happens in the book, but the narrator for the female character, Puck. She was very juvenile in sounding and made Puck sound like she was more like she was 12 rather than 17. And perhaps even though the actions of Puck at times were a bit like innocently juvenile, and that did come across in her tone at points, I still have to wonder if I would have enjoyed this more had I not had that narrator. Yeah, because especially since the narrator for Sean had like a really deep masculine, like older sounding tone to his voice, and they're the same age. Around the same age. Yeah, I couldn't relate to it. That was my biggest issue with it. So this was a audiobook issue, not the storyline. And essentially the storyline is around this little island, and each year at November, I think it is, they have a competition, a very deadly competition, around water horses, and they catch them and they train them to be as docile as they can. These are not just typical horses, and they're not made of water either, which sounds weird when you say they're water horses. Um, but they come out of the sea. They can swim in the sea. They live under the sea. They're very deadly and dangerous, but they can also be on land. The sea does cool to them, and it can make them very dangerous because when they are thinking of the sea, they forget about other people around them. They will attack people. They've got very vicious teeth. They don't sound like very nice horses. And it's sort of like an honor to the island to be like a man who can like tame the beast enough to ride it down the beach. Do you know what I mean? And so Sean has been doing this his whole life. His father used to do it and was unfortunately killed in one of the races. And he has won, I think, the last 6 times. And so he's in the race on his stallion Core, who was around when his father died. And he and Core have a very special relationship. He doesn't trust the horses, but at the same time, he can trust Core in a sense that he knows Core inside out, even though he knows that he could kill him in an instant. He has this really special bond, and I really enjoyed that part of it. And then you've got Puck, who unfortunately her parents were killed out at sea because they were fish merchants, by these horses, and her brothers and her have been living in the house. They don't really have any money, and you do win money if you win the races. And she decides, because one of her brothers is going to leave for the mainland, and wash his hands kind of with the kids, that he leaves behind, that she's going to ride in the races to try and keep him there for a little bit, and also to make some money. And of course, you're supposed to ride one of the water horses, and for her, she rides her own horse. Yeah. So that was a little bit unrealistic, but I think it was well done enough. I did enjoy the story enough to give it 4 stars. I more so did that for the side with Sean. I really enjoyed his point of view and all the suffering that he has gone through, and all the things that he did with the water horses was really interesting to me. I didn't find, because I think it was the narrator, but I just didn't find any real connection with Puck. There is a subplot romance in there, and I did think it was okay, but I could have gone without it. The ending really shook me. And I would have liked a little bit more at the end to know what happened next to Core and Sean, but you kind of can guess, I think, what happened. And yeah, overall, an alright read. I'm glad that I read it because my friend had mentioned it to me a few times, and I thought, I might just pick this up, and it filled the prompt. So I'm glad that I read it. If you stuck around to the end, thank you so much. Would you put a Christmas tree in the comments so I know that you made it all the way to here and spent so much time with me today? Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. I really had a good month of reading, even though there were a lot of ups and downs. And naturally, when you're reading books as fast as I was for the readathon, you're going to pick up books that perhaps weren't as great as books that you have on your TBR to read. So naturally, my average rating was quite low, but it's the longest time. It's been the longest time since I've read such a huge amount of books, and I'm really happy that I got to read 22 books this year in 1 month. Like, that's just crazy to me. I will be back with my November wrap up, so in the journal for you very, very soon. Thank you again so much for spending time with me today, and until we next meet, I hope you have fun reading. Bye, everyone.